Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. You're watching Alaska Weather. Thanks for joining us on this October 16th. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information around Alaska. You can do that a lot of different ways. An easy way online is mobile.weather.gov. Simply type in your village or city name and save that to the home screen on your mobile device. It uses a lot less bandwidth than our main webpage does, weather.gov/Alaska, and it probably works a lot better in the bush if you can at least contact that cell signal just a little bit. As always, our Alaska Weather Information line is open and available 24 hours a day. In-state 1-800-472-0391. And david.snyder@noaa.gov is how you find me if you can't find what you're looking for online anytime you like. I'm happy to help. Here's what's going on across Alaska tonight, especially looking at southeast. With plentiful rain moving it through southeastern Alaska, we're not done with the drought just yet, but there is a flood advisory posted around Ketchikan, specifically around Ward Lake. Areas around Ward Lake have seen quite a bit of water. In fact, we can see that on the atmospheric moisture channel here, this is showing what we would call an atmospheric river. The moisture that's streaming up from lower latitudes has been pointed right into southern parts of southeast. So a flood advisory is posted for areas around the southern inner channel, specifically around Ward Lake and Ketchikan. You've seen 4 to 9 inches of rain in the last 24 hours there. So that doesn't mean the drought is over. It just means things have been particularly wet in the last 24 to 48 hours. And we do expect to see more rain. This will help drought conditions, but it doesn't erase the months and months and months of very dry weather that you've had across many parts of southeast. We should get a new drought map update here as we head into Thursday, so plan for an update on that, and we'll try and have that on the show for you as well. As we take a look at the regular satellite picture here, you can see there are several waves of low pressure. One of those south and west of Haida Gwaii, that's that moisture pump we were just looking at a moment ago. And you can see another one sitting here across the southern parts of the Kenai Peninsula, and that wave attaches itself all the way out to clouds across the eastern sections of Russia. Another wave, which is the remnants of Hagibis there, south and west of St. Paul, northeast of Adak, and then another wave behind that. Put this in motion, and you can see one right after the other all along and just north of the jet stream that's working its way from northwest to south and east across the region, cutting right over the Gulf of Alaska. On the north side of that is where all these surface low-pressure systems live, but even further north, the weather's fairly quiet. We've got more of an easterly flow working its way across the Beaufort Seacoast right now. A little bit of a brisk wind that should keep up. A little bit of blowing snow as you move into the North Slope areas, closer to the coast, not so much. Areas of fog there. And this disturbance working through south central, producing a little bit of rain, snow, and even some graupel across the region. Those are those tiny little snowballs. They're not quite snow, not quite hail, not quite a freezing rain, but boy, it's something in between, and it can get your attention there. It sure does look like soft hail. That's what people call that a lot. As we watch this low pressure system work past St. Paul, we have had some gusts up around the 60-mile-an-hour range there. Not quite as bad as what it looked like it could be, and now some of those gusts are working their way through the Alaska Peninsula. Watch for periods of severe turbulence not only today and tonight, and probably into tomorrow. You'll see that in our aviation forecast coming up here in just a little bit. The primary weather maker right now is really this rain pump sitting here across southern parts of southeast, pushing a lot of that moisture up into the inside passages there. Rain and clouds are expected to continue. The other bonus, though, is that weather making its way up through the Lynn Canal. Freezing levels are going up and down there, and you've seen periods of rain and snow as a result. Sometimes that snow is making its way into Haines. As you head out to the west, you can see a lot of the speckled cloud cover. That's indicative of colder air working its way into the weather system. And that's certainly something we see a little bit more in the wintertime as this overall feature is wrapping in colder and drier air behind that. Kind of the jet stream is pulling that in from the eastern sections of Asia at this point. But really, the most active weather right now, southeast, with the rain and a little bit of snow trying to form its way into parts of southwest, but primarily a lot of that is out to sea. So, map looks like this. We have several waves of low pressure centers here all the way across the southern parts of Alaska today. 979 low, there's the main moisture feature that we see across the southern parts of the Panhandle. And then we have 2 other waves sitting across the northern parts of the Gulf. The one that's just outside of Prince William Sound is pulling in moisture from behind, and as that is grabbing into that cold and wet air right up against the Chugach Range and the Kenai Mountains, we're seeing snow around Kenai and Soldotna and graupel and mixed precipitation around the Anchorage area. It doesn't look like that's made its way into the valley as of mid-afternoon. Out across south and west, a 976 millibar low. All that's left of our very powerful and once very vigorous typhoon that is now not much to look at. 976 millibar low there, stretching from the Alaska Peninsula to just about Nunivak Island, and further west, a considerably drier weather maker there. Again, a low at 976. Areas of fog up across the north slope, some pockets of some light snow around Atkasukin Point South, and then a ribbon of snow working its way from east to west outside of Norton Sound, just on the southern Seward Peninsula coastline. It looked like by the radar picture that was not over Nome, though. Wouldn't be surprised to see some flakes there in town because of it. And it hadn't quite made it to Gamble or Savunga, but once again, it's in the vicinity. Wouldn't be surprised to see a few flakes passing through your region as a result of that. As we get into tonight, it looks like things are going to stay fairly mild. We've got a lot of open water, and that water is open because it is warm, and that is going to moderate the temperatures along the coastline as well. So things will be on the warmer side of average for most locations along the north and western coasts. Watch for areas of fog there, clouds across the north slope down to Point Barrow, areas of some light snow across the Bering Strait just to the south of that, and that could include St. Lawrence Island. It might just be rain for you. Low pressure all the way from the western Bering stretching across southwestern Alaska. Notice the tight pressure gradient here. You see how these black lines crushed together? That's the difference in atmospheric pressure, and the further away you get from these low pressure centers, the higher pressure goes. But as we always say in the wintertime, when these lines are just smashed together, that means that wind has to be moving along this boundary. And in Alaska, that can really present a problem for parts of the coastline that are right up against the mountains. So it would stand to reason that the winds coming into the mountains along the Aleutian chain and the winds coming into southern parts of southeastern British Columbia are being forced up, creating clouds, creating rain, and that's where some of our moisture problems are coming from. So areas around Ketchikan, no wonder it's raining as that air is slamming right into your mountains there. And just to the west, of course, showers will continue. All of this windward moving air, all creating cloud cover and areas of drizzle and light precipitation as we go. And I'll watch for some areas of snow across the Chugach and into the boundary range. Pockets of rain mixed with snow around Haines and Skagway, probably Yakutat, and same goes for Thursday. Low pressure is going to form up here and strengthen a little bit more in the northern Gulf as we go into Thursday and Friday. Again, that westerly moving, or I should say easterly moving air from the west coming off the Gulf into southeastern Alaska will keep the rain going. Snow at higher train. And snow showers across the interior. By and large, though, things are fairly quiet, more clouds than anything else across the region. A little bit of a southeasterly flow working its way across the Beaufort Seacoast. Much quieter weather for the west coast, even some sunshine, and low pressure working out of the Bering, quieting down, but still working its way through at 985 millibars. You can see showers passing through Bristol Bay and also the central and eastern chain for your Thursday. By Friday, low pressure is reorganizing here across the Bering, a 986 millibar low, kind of sloppy weather out across the chain. A little bit of a light southwesterly flow feeding its way into Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula. Up the west coast, showers for Nunivak Island and Macoriac. High pressure trying to strengthen across the YK Delta. It doesn't look like it's going to be really strong enough to clear things out, but it might be strong enough to trap some fog across the region in the morning. Watch for that up around the North Slope as well. 1001 millibar high pressure center. Areas across the western Alaska range might start to see some snow developing in the afternoon. Same goes for the Copper River Valley. Showers more likely around Prince William Sound, and unsettled, wet, cloudy, and damp weather for most of southeast, with a risk of a little bit of rain and snow continuing in the northern parts of the Lynn Canal. Thursday morning, temperatures are going to be cold around Anaktuvuk Pass, single-digit territory there, but look at the mild weather across the North Slope, near freezing at best. 27 for Nome, temps just below freezing around most of southwestern communities. Lower 40s for Cold Bay, King Cove, False Pass, Sand Point. 38 around Kodiak, upper 30s and lower 40s for most of the central and southern parts of southeast. Prince William Sound at or above freezing. Highs back in the mid to upper 40s for your day tomorrow. Just shy of 50 in Kodiak, 34 in Fairbanks, and still above freezing for the North Slope. Shishmaref looking at 36, the capital city 47, about 50 in Sitka with Adak and Atka just shy of the 50-degree mark. A little bit of a cooler morning there. Lower 40s by Friday morning, 35 in St. Paul, 25 for Unalakleet, 31 in Utqiagvik, and 18 around Eagle. 30s and 40s for most of southeast. Prince William Sound and the Kenai Peninsula looking at temps close to, but likely above freezing again. 38 in Kodiak with a high of 49 on Friday. Ambler, Bettles, you're looking at temps very close to 30, 33 in McGrath, and about the same there for Bethel. Quick check of temperatures as we get into the end of October. It looks like things are running above normal for most places in south central and southwest.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And on to aviation weather now. The two systems out in the Bering Sea are combining. The main focus will be to move through southwestern Alaska and eventually join up the very wide area of unsettled weather across the Gulf, all the way through the Bering and pushing toward the Pacific Northwest. The focus will really be across parts of southeast as we get more wet and sloppy weather moving in from the south. Conditions may stay mild, but cold enough up in the north to see IFR conditions at times through Chilkoot and maybe even White Pass. Snow levels will be going up and down, so you'll see that as rain and snow at the ground. Across the Susitna Valley into the western Alaska Range, we'll start out with areas of marginal conditions across the Kenai Peninsula up into the Copper River Basin. Dehne Pass will be one of the tricky spots early in the morning. Watch for the upper Yukon Valley and the upper Tanana Valley to see areas of MVFR and then IFR close to the North Slope, but probably not close over our North Slope villages. So watch for some improvement there and watch for that to move away. It looks like Point Barrow all the way down toward Wainwright will likely look at marginal conditions through a good chunk of the afternoon. You'll see some improvement around the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast, AKwx being one of the places that will be right there on the edge. Across the west, Gamble and Savunga, St. Lawrence Island, and all of our Bering Strait communities will look at marginal conditions to last through the afternoon. We'll look for VFR closer to our southwestern capes, Bristol Bay, and then areas along the Bering Seacoast with the Alaska Peninsula looking at marginal conditions. VFR is possible for St. Paul and St. George. That would be a treat for your Thursday afternoon flying. And out across the west, it looks like marginal conditions linger around Kiska all the way out toward Attu with VFR for Dutch Harbor and Alaska and maybe even Atka. As you get into Friday morning, that sneaks eastward just a little bit into the central chain. St. Paul and St. George still looking to be okay. The outer coasts of Norton Sound, including perhaps Nome, will be right there on the edge for VFR conditions for Friday morning, but plan for MVFR just in case. St. Lawrence Island under MVFR, as well as some areas in the North Slope, Point Barrow, and then east toward Wainwright, and just hugging the coastline all the way out toward AKwx. For southeast, we'll see MVFR continuing into Friday morning, with IFR shifting down toward Hyder and areas just east of Ketchikan, also looking for some potential for IFR around Chilkoot and White Pass. Once again, marginal conditions all the way down the outer coast towards Sitka. And then watch for hit and miss marginal conditions across the Gulf with some VFR for most of Prince William Sound, but Portage Pass, again, especially the eastern side, looking to be marginal throughout the day. You should see improvements perhaps late in the afternoon there. Watching for hit and miss marginal conditions around Valdez and Thompson Pass. All the way around the Alaska Range. Out toward the west, look for marginal into parts of Norton Sound through the Bering Strait communities, and again lingering very close to the North Coast communities. Unalaska, Dutch Harbor, and Nikolsky also looking for marginal conditions, with IFR lingering around some of our northern passes in southeast and hit and miss marginal through the inside waters. As we take a look at your individual pass conditions, then the North Slope looks pretty good. It looks like we'll expect VFR for both Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, a little bit of a different story today. Lake Clark expecting to see some minor improvements as we go, with marginal a little bit more likely for Merrill Pass as the day goes on. Rainy Pass also expected to hold on to marginal conditions throughout the day. Windy Pass looks pretty good for your Thursday. Isabel Pass also expected to be visual flight rule. Mentasta Pass looking to be marginal throughout the day. As we get into Dehne Pass, again, just hit and miss marginal in the region, but it could be right over Dehne Pass as we go. Portage Pass, especially the eastern side, looking at marginal conditions, and Chilkoot and White Pass starting out at IFR with the potential for some improvement throughout the day. Our freezing levels indicate that cold air is certainly taking over most of the 49th state at this point. You're going to see some changes out across southeast, where our levels go from about 2,000 feet around Haines and Skagway all the way into about 4,000 feet just south of the capital city, and then again warm up as you head south and east into the Pacific Northwest. For the southern Bering, all the way out across the western chain, levels are close to about 2,000 feet, and the surface freezing line not too far away. Chances are you're going to run into most places that are actually sub-freezing at this point. Icing potential is running around 5,000 feet and above for most of the Bering, as well as the central and eastern Aleutians, the Alaska Peninsula, and into south central, where levels climb to about 7,000 feet there. However, the risk for considerable moderate grows across parts of the Barren Islands, north of Kodiak, and from about Homer to the south and east, and also across central and southern parts of southeast, generally above 5,000 feet for some considerable moderate. Most areas across the interior are not expecting any icing threat. As we look at the jet stream, the fast-moving river of air is hugging the Gulf Coast waters there and around the Aleutians. Wind speeds max out around 130 to 150 knots, with the north and easterly flow coming in across the North Slope at 50 knots. Below that, you can see unsettled weather across the Bering Sea and the northern Gulf. The strongest winds are out here across the chain and the central Gulf, with more of an easterly flow across the North Slope, 35 to 40 knots, and low pressure in control across the northern Gulf and the west coast with northerly winds there. Our turbulence potential then really focused on the eastern chain below 4,000 feet with the potential for isolated severe. Welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service, and joining us today, two more people to talk about the augmented reality sandbox. It's Alana Valaji. She's a University of Alaska Fairbanks mechanical engineering student, helped design and work on the details to make this new type of sandbox there. Thanks for joining us, Alana. Thanks. And Courtney Breest, she's the outreach coordinator for AKwx, which is the experimental program to stimulate competitive research. It's a program funded nationally by the National Science Foundation, right?
Yes.
Okay. Alana, tell us about how you changed and adapted this version of the augmented reality sandbox. It's a really cool tool.
So Gina approached us with 3 goals for this new version of the sandbox. They wanted it to be compact in a light system that could travel around the state. They wanted it to be child-oriented, so we designed the sandbox to have 3 different levels.
Okay.
It's pretty cool. You can have younger children, you can have high school kids. I guess I should say high school teenagers.
Sure.
And then we also designed it to be more marketable, user-friendly, so that this could be seen eventually in classrooms all over the place, all over the state.
Okay. And you had a big hand in this, but this was a team approach, right?
Definitely. It was a really good experience for myself, for George Stevens, who we'll see later.
One of our hand models today. Yeah.
For 2 other members who aren't here today, Cody Klingman and Austin Hunt. And it was just a really good learning experience all around.
Very good. And this is something that is part of your learning experience as well, so you get to check a box in your education.
Yeah,
right?
it's a requirement for seniors of mechanical engineering at University of Alaska Fairbanks.
Very good. Very good. Well, it is a wonderfully inquisitive tool, fun to play with, and I hope to get my hands in the sand here in just a little bit. But it's also part of a bigger program, something that we were talking about a moment ago, AKwx, and that's what Courtney is here to tell us more about. What is AKwx and why do you need a sandbox?
Well, AKwx, as you mentioned, is a national program. We're funded nationally, but we're actually located statewide. We're at UAF, we're at UAA, we're in Southeast at UAS. And she mentioned, you know, taking the sandbox as an educational tool, and that's where I'm an outreach coordinator for the South Central test case.
Okay.
Our focus is on the Kenai watershed, and we are really interested in using these tools like the sandbox to interact with the students down there and get them interested in STEM and also communicate the research findings that we've been having throughout the state.
Okay. And one of those, as George and Eric are kind of changing the contours for us there from UAF to maybe something that resembles a little bit of something more of the Kenai watershed, which is one of your focuses for the study, right? And specifically looking at some of the changes there and how that impacts people and also the salmon.
Yes, it is all of our research is social and environmental.
Okay.
So we have social scientists working hand in hand with our environmental scientists. One of the things we're studying is Upper Russian Lake, and we have a researcher taking sediment cores from that lake. So one of the things we're going to use the sandbox to communicate is how the landscape changed over a long period of time, thousands of years, going from glacier, covered by glacier ice, to being filled with water. And then
that's what they're doing right now.
Exactly. So
live.
So they're moving the
cool.
water around. And then I think they've got some props over there, because we're also going to go a little bit more in depth and explain how the salmon got there.
Okay.
So using
and there's
these,
the salmon.
Exactly. Oh, I think there's a few more.
Yeah, we like more salmon in Alaska. More salmon.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really taking the findings from our research grant and just trying to connect with the community and translate it in a really hands-on and exciting way, so people can, you know, interact with us as much as possible.
Well, sure. That makes the learning and the science real and quite literally in your face, rather than just some boring black and white paper that you have to read about. This is something that people can understand better because it's visual and they're touching and feeling and seeing these changes, right?
Yeah, and get them engaged. And then outreach is a huge component, and working with the younger students, and actually even, I mean, working with the UAF graduate and engineering students it's a huge part of our grant, and we really enjoy it.
Oh, it is wonderfully exciting. And so, Alana, you were telling us that this is built to travel.
Right.
And this is built to do more things than version 1. Where can this type of project go in Alaska? And what can it demonstrate?
I mean, we were hoping to eventually get to villages that were harder to reach, that you couldn't necessarily move a whole fixed instrument to, right? You need something that can pack up, fit in your truck bed. I mean, one of the most attractive parts of this project is that this was going to be something that was used past our graduation point. You know, this is
Okay.
going to be something that lives in the state for years.
Right, right. Well, it looks like you're well on your way with that. So what are, give me another example. What else can this show us? We've talked about the Kenai River watershed. What's the coolest thing that you've played in the sand with? What's your idea?
Well, I definitely enjoy the props, but we also like kind of building up a giant mound, and if you put some water behind it, you can make a little runway, I guess, and
Okay.
you know, demonstrate the effects of the hydrology by just putting up a dam and letting it all pour right down.
Okay.
And so that could, I think you mentioned it earlier, you could even demonstrate the effects of a tsunami
Right.
or
okay.
something along those lines.
So it's not just topography, but it's also hydrology
Yes.
and coastal surge mapping and some of the coastal changes that we're seeing here in Alaska, and seeing what the smaller changes in the sandbox might do to kind of a real effect of a slosh or a push of water up on the coast. Tsunami inundation mapping, or even glacial dam release, as some has been demonstrated before.
Yep.
So wow, that's just an impressive thing. That it seems like the possibilities are nearly endless with this, and probably even more ideas that are popping up in your head too.
Yeah, as we speak.
Very cool. All right. Well, if folks want to get more information about EPSCOR, you guys are online. You're on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. AKEPSCOR, right? EPSCOR, Alaska EPSCOR, that is. And again, you guys are funded by the National Science Foundation,
Yes,
so
sir.
more to come from that, and a longer-term study there. Thank you, ladies, for joining us today. Congratulations on your hard work there. This is really fun. And for now, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with this edition of Alaska Weather Facts, and I'm going to go play in the sandbox there. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And back with a look at your current sea ice. As of this afternoon, we're starting to see refreezing along the lagoons and some of the bays there across the North Slope, stretching all the way from the Chukchi Coast all the way up toward Utqiagvik, past Prudhoe Bay, and all the way out toward Kaktovik. New ice is forming mainly inside of the barrier islands. Now, we're also seeing new ice in the areas they're shaded as blue, and I apologize once again, this is not our normal ice graphic. We've had some sea ice updates in the program, and we're working to get those back into the form that we routinely show. So stand by, but this is actually the image that you would see on the website if you go to weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. And what the Alaska Sea Ice Program folks tell me is that new marginal ice is forming there across some of the higher concentrations that you see painted in red. It's forming to the south and also forming from east to west there. So more ice on the way. It's good news. Here's a look at southeast, and you can see stronger southeasterly flow inside of the Clarence Strait, 20 knots and 7-foot seas there, an onshore flow across the southern parts of the outer coast, and then more of a south and easterly flow wrapping into low pressure here in the Gulf. Northerlies coming out of the north through Lynn Canal means colder air, so periods of rain and snow sure possible there as the freezing level kind of goes up and down with the passing waves. 3-foot seas expected there, gusts to 35 in Stevens Passage on Thursday. Wind should diminish a little bit more there on Friday. Southerlies in the Clarence Strait holding at 20 knots. Onshore flow at 20 knots for the southern outer coast at 20-foot seas there. And south and southeasterlies rotating around. Low pressure continue there across the Gulf. 15 knots there coming into Port Alexander, Sitka, and parts of Cross Sound. Thursday, south central northeasterlies inside of Prince William Sound. Easterlies coming across the northern Gulf, wrapping around low pressure again just to your south. North and westerlies coming across the Barrens, 20 to 25. 4 to 9-foot seas expected with the north and easterly flow coming down Cook Inlet, 15 to 20 knots with a 3 to 5-foot sea on Thursday, diminishing even more on Friday with northerlies there at 10 knots. 20-foot sea, 20-knot winds coming across the Barrens with a 5 to 8-foot sea across the Barrens. That's better. Northeasterlies for Prince William Sound. Northwesterlies out of the Kenai Fjords and Resurrection Bay. 15 knots, 5-foot seas for you on Friday. Those strong westerlies we had yesterday, those are diminishing as we head into tomorrow. 25 to 40-knot winds. This is improving as we get into Thursday and Friday. 21-foot seas, that's better. It's not great, but it's better. 40 knots there, 35 knots on the other side. 30 to 45 across the southern end of Kodiak Island. 19 to 20-foot seas, 4-foot seas inside of Shelikof Strait with a 15-knot wind, becoming 20 knots from the south and west as we get into Friday afternoon. 30 to 35 across the western Gulf, looking at 12 to 14-foot seas as we get into your Friday afternoon. 7-foot seas inside of Bristol Bay, 11-foot seas down the coast, 25 knots from the west on Friday. For westerlies across the Aleutians, we go 30 to 35, it looks like. 15 to 16-foot seas in most areas. You'll get into 19-footers here north of Unalaska and outside of Nikolsky there. Look for stronger winds coming into the Bering Sea coast of the Alaska Peninsula, and that too is diminishing. As we get into Friday, situations improving at around Kiska and Attu, 15 to 20 knots. You're looking at anywhere from 10 to 11 foot seas across the central and eastern chain, 25 knots from the south and west on either side of Nikolsky and Unalaska. Across the west coast on Thursday, looking like a northeasterly flow coming out of Norton Sound all the way down toward Macoriac. A westerly flow for St. Paul and St. George, 35 knots with a 17-foot sea. It looks like seas for the most part will hold around 8 to 12 feet for the west coast, 2 feet inside of Norton Sound, diminishing even more as we get into Friday, and easterly at 10 knots there. So things are getting quieter with that high pressure system in place. Easterly is a little bit stronger, though, wrapping around low pressure. And again, light winds along the coast, but out to sea. And St. Matthew, St. Paul, St. George, all looking at a little bit more chop, 7 to 10 foot seas there on Friday. For the North Slope, brisk winds moving across, 30 to 35, looking for 10 to 12 foot seas. And easterlies coming off the Chukchi, 15 to 30. Looking for 4 to 9 foot seas there on Thursday. For Friday, more of a light and south and easterly wind coming out of Kotzebue Sound, 10 to 15. And the strong easterlies coming across the Beaufort, 30 to 35, should continue anywhere from 10 to 12 foot seas there, thanks to the open water. Let's take a quick recheck of the weather for tonight and tomorrow. A low pressure here sitting outside of the southern outer coast, slinging a lot of water up toward Ketchikan. 4 to 9 inches in the last 24 hours there around Ward Lake. There is some flooding going on. A flood advisory is posted, so watch for that. The drought's not over, but the rain will continue to fall. Watch for showers around the Pribilof, St. Matthew, and all the way along the chain there. A north and westerly flow coming into the Gulf, feeding into low pressure, will continue. Waves of a little bit of snow shower across the interior, mostly cloud cover, though, for many locations. It looks like most of South Central will see some passing areas of rain and snow, nothing too significant there. Showers across Southwest, and as we get into Friday, plenty of clouds across the interior, a better chance for snow across the Copper River Valley and across the western Alaska Range. Showers continue for Southeast.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.